Hello guys, this is your friend. We are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Build Harem with Tsunade Temari Tenten, Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start a new fanfic. Naruto awoke with a gasp. He felt a cold sensation running down his right arm. He was so tired, even opening his eyelids felt like a Herculean effort. His entire body felt like spasms of pain were running through it with every breath. If he could just go back to sleep, he wouldn't have to worry about the pain. Again, he felt that cold tap on his arm, almost like ice running through his veins. He wondered what it could be. Red lights started flashing in his brain. All of a sudden, everything come flooding back in. The fight with Kagaya, meeting the sage, his Rasengan meeting Sasuke's Chidori. Lying there with Sasuke thinking he was dead, he forced himself to open his eyes and was met with a mop of bright pink hair. Sakura, man, am I glad to see you. Shut up, idiot. You need all the strength you can get, Sakura said, smiling down at Naruto, with tears running down her nose and falling onto his arm. That's the cold sensation I must have been feeling, thought Naruto as he watched Sakura's tears falling onto his arm. He followed the water leaving her face and saw it hitting his arm. Naruto took a gulp of air as his brain made sense of what he saw. Sakura saw Naruto's eyes lock with hers. She followed them down to his arm and watched with sadness as his expression changed from one of happiness to shock. I'm so sorry, I couldn't save your arm. The artery was so badly damaged I used up almost all of my chakra just to stop the bleeding. Sakura's eyes filled with tears again and she started sniffing intensely. Naruto was overwhelmed with emotions. Pull yourself together. You did it. You saved the world for sake. Naruto held back his tears and put on a fake smile for Sakura. Don't worry about me, Sakura. It'll be fine. It's just an arm after all. How's Sasuke doing? Naruto looked to his right and watched his brother lying down passed out as Sakura poured healing chakra into his left arm. Sakura looked towards Sasuke. After all of this, he still cares about the well-being of the one man who has tried so hard to kill him time and again. I really don't think I will ever be able to understand the limits of forgiveness, Naruto has thought Sakura. I've stopped the bleeding on his arm, but he's much weaker than you. He doesn't have Kyuubi chakra to speed up his body's natural healing process, but I think he will be fine, Sakura stated simply. Naruto looked back up and saw Kakashi looking down at him and tried to put on a smile while letting a small laugh escape his lips. Bet you never thought it'd be a match for your prized student, hey, Naruto stated with a glint in his eyes. Kakashi looked down at Naruto, amazed that he could still be so full of life at a time like this. You know, technically I saved everyone in that fight against Kagaya with my amazing Susanoo abilities. I think I'm actually my own best student, said Kakashi as he put a hand behind his head and started laughing in a very Naruto-like way. What? I pretty much single-handedly took her down with just my sexy no jutsu. Imagine if I had actually tried. I just wanted to give you guys a chance at her so you didn't feel left out when we told everyone else how we saved the world, laughed Naruto back at Kakashi. Sakura watched the conversation unfold. She felt a small spark of happiness return to her as she saw the smile spread across her sensei and Naruto face. Could you shut up already? Some of us are trying to rest. Sasuke had woken up to the laughing of Naruto and had heard him bragging about his fight with Kagaya. Besides, without my help you would all still be busy trying to stand up in that weird gravity dimension of hers. Man, she really was the worst. High. Everyone stopped what they were doing and stared at Sasuke. Did you just try and make a joke, Baka? Laughed Naruto loudly. Sasuke looked at his brother and smiled. Thank you, Naruto, for everything. Sasuke closed his eyes and just let his senses relax. After all these years of running, here I am back in Team 7 and trying to be part of a family again. Sasuke smiled. For the first time in years, he started feeling a connection, something he wanted to protect. Sakura looked at Sasuke with a smile on her face. She had long given up hope that Sasuke would ever return to the village. She was so sure of it that she had closed her heart and forced herself to believe that Sasuke was already dead. That this Rouge Nin running around was just an after-image of who she had fallen in love with, a shadow filled with hate and anger, but somehow Naruto had fought through that loathing, he had found the speck of light and brought it back. She was still wary of the dark-haired stranger lying down before her as she tried to heal his broken limb as best she could with her limited chakra reserves, but somewhere deep inside, hope started breaking through her inner barriers again. I don't mean to rush you too, but we still have a few thousand people to save from some dodgy tree that eats chakra, in case you had forgotten, sighed Kakashi as he looked lazily off into the distance as the sunrise framed the destruction all around them. I doubt even the first Hokage would be able to go up against these two right now, they truly are gods, thought Kakashi as he tried to gauge just how big the crater was that they were standing in. He remembered back to seeing the two avatars high above the forest canopy, the Nine Tails looking fearless and Sasuke's Susanoo overflowing with power. He felt a cold shiver run down his spine as he remembered the final blow that had fallen between those two monsters. The shockwave had caused Sakura to lose consciousness and had almost caused himself to black out from the sheer pressure driven into their bodies from the wind. These two truly stood above everyone else in this world. Naruto's face went pale. Kakashi-sensei. How are we supposed to release the jutsu with only one hand? We can't form the sign. Kakashi's face quickly followed suit with Naruto's and turned a pale shade of white. Sasuke let out a small laugh. Relax, idiot. Remember the sage said we had to release it together anyway. Lucky for us we blew off opposite hands so it would still work. Oh yay. Well then let's get to it, shouted Naruto as he attempted to sit up from his position and immediately fainted and fall head first into Sakura's lap as she caught him. Idiot, whispered Sakura as she cut off her healing chakra just in time to catch Naruto and hold him into her chest. It's beautiful, you know, in an eerie sort of way, Naruto said to no one in particular as they had finally reached the center of the battle stage. It had taken them the better part of the day to finally make it back here as Sasuke and Naruto had needed to almost be carried all the way, and they had taken rest stops every few kilometers to get their breath back. Ready? Asked Naruto. Ready, responded Sasuke. Naruto reached over and lifted his hand next to Sasuke, making one half of the seal that was required. Sasuke didn't move. They're all going to want to kill me when they know. Know what? That you avenged the entire Leaf Village by taking down the man that massacred one of our strongest clans, that you helped save the world from the god of all shinobi. Naruto stared into his brother's eyes, as he saw tears forming on the corner of Sasuke's cheeks. Sasuke knew Naruto was giving him an out. Naruto knew the truth about his brother and yet here he was casually allowing Sasuke an escape to explain away everything he had done over the last few years. But he couldn't bring himself to accept it. Naruto, I tried to kill you. Please, that was just a fight between friends, you didn't really think such a weak attack could hurt me, laughed Naruto, and besides, what the people don't know won't hurt them, isn't that right Sakura, Kakashi-sensei? Kakashi looked at the two shinobi in front of him and smiled. If I recall correctly you both lost your arms sealing Kagaya away, isn't that right Sakura? Sakura didn't say anything. She had heard the conversation but couldn't allow herself to forgive Sasuke for what he had done as quickly as her sensei and Naruto had. She kept quiet but slowly nodded her head and looked in the distance just waiting for it to be over, thinking about her home and her parents, how much she wanted to be with them again and tell them she loved them. Sasuke laughed all these years, and these three still care about me, how could I have been so blind? Connections to the people around us, that's what truly matters. Sasuke lifted his hand and formed the other half of the sign with Naruto. Release, they said in unison. Naruto, what should I do about the Biju? If I release them all now I think we will have a mass panic on our hands, people are still very untrusting of them, asked Sasuke. Naruto smiled. He could feel his connection with the tailed beasts that they were all still unconscious. Sasuke had drained all their chakra during the fight and Kurama was still passed out from delving all of his chakra to Naruto. Leave them for now, They're safer locked away until we can get things sorted. None of them are conscious, so they won't be able to fend for themselves if somebody wanted to try and seal them. Ino opened her eyes. She couldn't understand what was going on. One second she was having this lovely dream, the next she had awoken into this stifling chamber that felt like it was made out of dried leaves. She started coughing as the walls of her prison slowly gave away, dropping her about 5 meters until she landed on the ground with a thud. Ino looked around her. She immediately stood up and took a fighting pose, analyzing the situation around her. The last thing she remembered was staring up into the moon. It had been so beautiful she couldn't look away. Ino, you're okay. Ino turned around and saw Choji running towards her with a smile and on his face as he dove into her and gave her a huge hug. I am fine, Choji, laughed Ino, and she returned the hug and stepped back to look around. What's happened? I'm not sure. The last thing I remember was looking into the moon, and then nothing, stated Choji. All around them people were nervously looking around the battlefield, wary of another attack at any moment. Ino was one of the first people awake, and as she looked around she slowly saw more and more pods begin to open and shinobi being released. Choji, look! Shouted Ino, pointing to the top of the hill behind them. It's Naruto. Ino and Choji ran towards them as fast as they could, Ino a few meters ahead. As she got closer she saw a massive smile on Naruto's face and her heart began to flutter. Everything's okay, he saved us again, I know it. Ino dove into Naruto and gave him a colossal hug which pushed him over backwards and into the ground. Nice to see you too, Ino, chuckled Naruto. If you could squeeze me just a little bit less though, that would be great. I'm in a fair amount of pain. Naruto smiled as he looked at Ino above him. Ino wiped the tears of happiness out of her eyes and started helping Naruto back to his feet. When she put out her hand to lift him up, she stepped back in shock when she noticed his missing arm. Naruto, what happened? The last thing I remember. Ino, commanded Kakashi, before you get lost in stories I need you to broadcast a message to the shinobi force. We need to get everything back in order as quickly as possible. Yes, Commander, replied Ino, as she grabbed Naruto's good arm and helped him back up, turning to Kakashi and getting ready to mentally transfer the message to the allied force commanders. Sakura watched Ino falling all over her Naruto with slight anger. Who does she think she is, knocking over Naruto like that and hurting him? Sakura clenched her knuckles and silently wished her 1000 healing jutsu was still active so she could punch a certain fangirl into next week. Choji had stopped a few meters in front of Naruto. He had noticed who was standing next to him, and hadn't let his guard down yet. Sasuke was still a Rouge Nin as far as he was concerned and required to be taken out. Everything okay, Sakura? Stated Choji as he saw her face turn angry the second Ino had appeared in front of Naruto. Sakura sighed and walked past Naruto and Ino towards Choji. Yes, everything is going to be alright now, she said, smiling at him. It's all over. Naruto and Kakashi did it. We won. This is Ino Yamanaka. All shinobi are be ordered to withdraw to their respective divisions. All healing teams are required to set up a medic station and be prepared to treat large quantities of soldiers. All sensory teams are tasked with sweeping the battlefield and bringing all injured shinobi to the medical unit's temporary station for treatment. As of right now, the Fourth Great Shinobi War has officially ended. This was where her orders from Kakashi had stopped and Ino was supposed to end her message, but she couldn't help herself as she beamed looking at the blonde-haired ninja next to her and sent one last sentence out to the waiting soldiers. Naruto Uzumaki has saved us all, again. I feel this scene could be extracted more, so I'll probably come back and update it. The battlefield was silent as Ino sent her message to the sensory divisions, who amplified it and sent it on to the entire shinobi force. At the end of the message, thousands of cheers could be heard echoing across the land. There were no villages or segregations, only survivors. Tears of joy were spilt as brother hugged brother. Everyone was equal on the battlefield. They were ninja. Tsunade smiled. Tears of joy were falling down her eyes as she looked at her adopted son atop the hill standing next to Kakashi and Ino. He had a hand behind his head and was laughing and waving as people started noticing where he was. He always knew how to make an entrance, didn't he? Stated a cool voice next to her. Tsunade looked to her right and saw Gaara standing there. You know, this is the third time Naruto has saved my life now. I'm starting to feel slightly indebted to him, Gaara said, smiling. Tsunade laughed. Cage, I'm glad to see you're okay. Gaara frowned. I am, but I'm not so sure about the rest of my family. How many sand ninjas have died because of this war? Because of Madara, because I was too weak to protect them. Madara defeated all 5 of us Cage in combat without breaking a sweat. The fact that Naruto managed to defeat him is still unbelievable to me. You are one of the strongest shinobi in the world, Gaara. None of this was your fault. If anything, you saved thousands of lives. If it wasn't for your quick thinking and pulling Naruto out of the way when the Kyuubi was removed from him, we would all be dead, Tsunade stated matter of fact. Gaara nodded, taking in the Hokage's words. He looked into the distance again and his form stiffened. I don't think Naruto did defeat him alone, Hokage. If I'm not mistaken, your class S Rouge Nin is standing just behind him. Tsunade looked up at where Gaara was pointing and a dark shadow passed over her face. I think it's time we find out what truly happened while we were disposed, don't you think, Kazakage? Gaara silently nodded and sent a chakra pulse through his sand, creating 4 floating sand eyes that hovered above them. Into each he inscribed a time and location. The eyes sped off in random directions, each looking for its intended target, one for each of the addition 3 Cage, and one heading straight towards Naruto. Temari smiled as she looked at the back of her younger brother. Standing next to the Hokage, she still couldn't believe it was finally over. She fell backwards onto her bum and then leaned back so she was on her back. Just lying down, letting her tired body relax for a few seconds. Enjoying the cheers and sounds of celebration she could hear around her. Her mind went back to the fight against the third Raikage. She had truly thought she was going to die there. Her strongest wind attack hadn't been able to scratch him, but she didn't care. She was prepared to run headfirst into battle to protect the people behind her. Totally expecting to die, and then he came, jumping in front of the Raikage and deflecting his attack like it was no big deal. Temari had always thought she was one of the strongest wind style users in the elemental nations, but when she saw Naruto's Rasen Shuriken, that fallacy had been crushed almost instantly. Nothing she could do could even come close to matching the power he held within his hand, and even after he managed to hit the Raikage with that and it didn't work, when everyone else gave up he kept on fighting, and found a way to win. Temari blushed slightly thinking about the savior of the ninja world. It's actually bullshit that his wind element is that much stronger than mine. I am from the land of wind, I should be unmatched in my wind abilities. Temari thought to herself angrily. Right there and then she sat back up and watched the blonde-haired ninja on top of the mountain and made a mental promise to herself. Nobody will be stronger than her in wind elemental, even if she had to physically force Naruto to teach her everything he knew. Temari let out a large sigh as she saw her younger brother turning around and starting to walk toward her. Of course he could sense she was so close behind him, always the observant Kazakage, wasn't he? Temari, why is your face so red? You look like you've been blushing, asked Gaara as he got closer. He very quickly had to dodge a rock that was thrown towards his face at supersonic speeds. It's just cause it's so hot, shot back Temari with a glare, daring her brother to challenge her statement. But instead Gaara looked at her concerned. Temari, your arm, it's bleeding. Temari looked down at her left arm and saw the large trail of blood oozing down. Yay, I cut myself on the edge of my fan when I fell earlier during the battle, but it's okay. Let's go to the medical tents and get it seen to, said Gaara as he gently lifted Temari up with his sand until she was standing next to him. We really don't need to. There must be other ninja who are in much worse condition than me who should be seen to first, argued Temari, but it was a weak argument and she knew it. Gaara didn't even look up from his walk and Temari caught up with him as they slowly made their way to the medical tents that were hastily being set up, but not before Temari had one last glance back at the blonde locks that were flowing in the wind behind her. Byakugan, shouted Hinata as her eyes lit up with the new information she was currently getting from them. There are 4 shinobi lying down by the river. It looks they can't move, they will need help urgently. 2 more are just past them, passed out against the bank. Several ninja ran past her with nods as they went to collect the injured soldiers. Hinata closed off her Byakugan and took in a deep breath, leaning over, pushing against her knees to catch her breath. She had been doing this for the better part of an hour now, trying to find everyone who needed help. A warm hand rested on her shoulder. I think that's enough, Hinata. The others can manage from here. You can barely keep yourself standing. Kiba stood next to her, smiling. Let's get you back to base and get something to eat. I'm starving. Akamaru began licking her hand and nuzzling into her left hip. I think your dog might be hungry too, laughed Hinata. You haven't seen him yet, have you? Hinata asked with concern in her eyes. She had been so happy when she had received the news from Ino about how her Naruto had saved them, and had been so proud when she looked at his outline shining on top of the hill. She was about to go run up to him when she saw Ino holding his hand, standing next to him, and all the courage she had a moment before had vanished, replaced with doubt. Not yet, but I imagine being a hero keeps you pretty busy, laughed Kiba. Hinata smiled and walked in between Kiba and Akamaru back towards base camp. She was feeling rather hungry after all. The next few hours went by rather quickly for Naruto. He was swarmed with people trying to talk to him, or even just touch the hero of the ninja world. He tried his best to remember all their names and all the faces that came past and thanked him for everything. Kakashi had left a few minutes after Ino had made her announcement to the waiting ninja army, but not before rolling his eyes at Ino about her last line at how Naruto saved the world and telling her it's impossible to keep anything secret around woman these days, and enquiring if she would like a straw with her up, which got him a rather hard punch in the shoulder by Sakura and Ino respectively at the time. Kakashi had taken Sasuke with him, as he could see the panic in Sasuke's eyes about having to deal with all these people right now. A powerful shinobi the kid might be, but social skills were something that took time to develop. Choji had said his goodbyes and left to go help with the cleanup operation, but Ino and Sakura hadn't left Naruto's side during the entire ordeal and had both formed a mental bond of mutual hatred for all the fangirls that had come up towards Naruto trying to leave their names and villages with him on pieces of paper. This had happened so often Sakura had started suspecting some of the more frugal ninjas had set up shop just outside of the large crowd that was surrounding them, selling scraps of paper and pens for large profits. Naruto had outright refused to sign anything that was put in front of him, stating he was no more of a hero than everybody else on the battlefield that day and he should be the one asking for their signatures. By the time the crowd had dispersed enough for Naruto to walk through it, he was starving and just wanted to get something to eat and find a nice warm bed to sleep in for a few hours. Let's go grab something to eat, Ino. Sakura, I'm starving, Naruto said, looking at the 2 girls with his pale blue eyes. Both Ino and Sakura were lost for words and just nodded and started following behind him. As Naruto walked towards the base camp, he saw someone he had been wanting to talk to since the battle ended, Hinata. Naruto shouted as he started jogging towards her with a large smile on his face. He saw her look up at him and her face turned suddenly bright red as Naruto ran towards her and put his one good arm around her, pulling her into a hug. I'm so glad you're okay. I was worried when I didn't see you after the battle. Hinata was too busy focusing on maintaining her breathing and trying to ensure her heart didn't pop directly out of her chest to notice anything Naruto had said. She was still as a board and was in her own plane of existence where everything was right with the world. She felt his hand wrapped around her body. Wait a second. Hinata dropped back into the world hard. As Naruto stepped backwards, her fear was confirmed. Naruto, what happened to your arm? She gasped, looking horrified. Naruto smiled, releasing a half-hearted laugh as he put his good arm behind his head. It's a long story, Hinata, and I only really want to tell it once, so I'll wait for everyone to be here. Naruto felt bad lying to Hinata. He knew he was going to lie to everyone for his brother's sake and it didn't bother him, but lying to Hinata felt wrong. He resolved to tell her the truth. She deserved it. she alone had stepped in front of pain to save his life, but not right now, after we get back home, thought Naruto. Naruto, shouted Kiba, jumping past Hinata and putting Naruto in a solid bro hug. Man, I knew we hanged out with you for a reason, he laughed as him and Naruto chucked together. We're on our way to grab something to eat, if you want to join us. I thought you would never ask, said Naruto brightly. I'm starving, I hope they have ramen at camp. Hinata smiled, watching her Naruto talk about eating ramen like nothing had happened. She looked up at Ino and Sakura, who were both looking at her with slight jealousy in their eyes, but that quickly vanished as they smiled at her and both of them pulled her into a bone-crush hug. The five friends talked and laughed their way back to camp. Things were starting to look up. Naruto smiled as he looked around at all his friends in the room, and his heart broke for all the faces he knew should be here but had been taken away. Tsunade had organized a separate tent be put up for Naruto and his friends so the poor kid could have something to eat and a bit of rest. The second he had stepped inside the main camp, he had been swamped again by people trying to get a look at him. Sakura had quickly rushed off and organized with Tsunade the arrangements, much to Naruto's relief. The arrangement hadn't solely been for Naruto. It was impossible to keep the camp under control with Naruto just randomly walking about the place as everyone stopped what they were doing to try and see him. The room in the tent was relaxed as people were laughing and eating and talking about the recent battle and all the amazing feats they had seen. All his old teammates were here. Shino, Choji and Kiba were busy arguing over who had made the best use of Naruto's Charka boost and who would therefore make for the best Jinchuriki. Tenten and Hinata were enjoying a cup of tea and reminiscing over how easy things were when they were younger with Ino and how much they missed the academy. Shikamaru had come past for 5 minutes to say hello and greet everyone, but apparently had some duties to take care of for the Ninja Alliance and would check in with them again as soon as he was done. Lee was busy doing handstands on the table, promising Naruto that if he couldn't do 1,000 handstand push-ups to honor Gai-sensei's sacrifice, he would perform 1,000 laps of the campsite. Naruto's smile faltered for a second as he looked around the table. What's wrong, Naruto? Asked Sakura, sensing his sudden change in demeanor. Hinata stopped her conversation and listened to Naruto's answer. She too had noticed his fake smile and the glint missing from his eyes. Naruto whispered back towards Sakura with slight tears in his eyes, thinking only she could hear him. Neji should be here with us right now, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to save him. I'm sorry it wasn't me. Instia. Smack. The entire room went dead quiet. Nobody could believe what they had just seen. Hinata had stood up and slapped Naruto across his cheek so hard it had almost knocked him off his chair. Don't you dare say that. Neji died a hero. He died protecting what he believed in, protecting his ninja way. The fact you would even think that is a disgrace to his memory. Hinata was furious. Naruto had never seen this side of Hinata before. She was livid at him. When he didn't respond, she hit him again, and again. Naruto didn't move. He knew he deserved it. He knew he was to blame for the death of her family member, and it was only fair for Hinata to want to hurt him to try take away the pain she was feeling slightly. He tasted blood in his mouth but didn't raise a hand to defend himself. Hinata, that's enough, came a voice from the tent entrance. Tsunade walked inside and saw everyone frozen in shock, still staring at this shy little girl beating up the strongest ninja they had ever seen. We requested your presence in the Hokage tent 15 minutes ago, Naruto. I trust you can find the time in your busy schedule of being beaten up by the princess of the Hyuga clan to join us. Hinata stepped back with tears in her eyes and proudly walked out of the tent into the cool air outside without even glancing at Tsunade. Now, Naruto, scolded Tsunade. She looked as her adopted son stood up and followed her out of the tent in a daze. She wasn't sure what Hinata was hitting him for, but she felt quite assured that whatever it was, he had most probably deserved it. What just happened here? Stammered Tenten, looking very confused. Sakura smiled. Naruto just needed a gentle fist of sense knocked into him is all. The entire room let out a loud groan at the terrible pun Sakura had just used. That's definitely a punishment shot for that, laughed Ino as she pulled a bottle of sake out onto the table, laughing. Where did you get that? We're literally in a war zone, Ino, laughed Kiba. A girl always comes prepared, Ino stated offhandedly as she started pouring shots for the group. Now somebody go bring Hinata back, we can't have a shot to Neji without her. Sakura didn't have to go far to find Hinata. She was standing a few meters away from the tent looking up at the sunset. She put her hand on Hinata's should. It's beautiful, isn't it? Sakura stated without thinking. Hinata started crying softly. I shouldn't have hit him like that, but I'm furious that he said that. Sakura, he doesn't care about anyone but himself. I already lost Neji and now he goes and wishes he was dead. Sakura sighed. You know he didn't mean it, Hinata. He's just in a tough place right now, and I'm glad you hit him, cause if you didn't I would have, and I wouldn't have held back. Hinata laughed and wiped her nose with her sleeve. I doubt even the legendary hero could survive a full-out punch from you at the moment. Well, you certainly gave him something to think about. Those slaps could be heard from around the entire camp. Some people actually reported small earthquakes in the area, said Sakura, mocking Hinata with a small laugh. Let's go back inside, Hinata. Ino somehow managed to smuggle some sake in and we're all planning on having a shot to Neji's memory. I'd like that, said Hinata. How did Ino manage to smuggle alcohol into a war zone anyway? I have no idea, but I do like her priorities, said Sakura as she and Hinata both started walking back towards the tent laughing. I think this reaction from Hinata towards Sakura could be extended a bit more. I am just really bad at writing conversations in general. Naruto followed Tsunade into the Hokage tent, not looking forward to having to explain everything that happened. As he stepped in, he heard a familiar voice and started smiling. Yo, it's Naruto, Slayer of the Demon's Soul. We sure missed you, bro. I'm glad you're okay, laughed Naruto, meeting him in the middle of the room and giving him a fist bump. A loud cough silenced the room. Naruto, I see we're not important enough in your life to warrant being on time for a meeting. The Raikage stared at Naruto with fierce intensity in his eyes. Naruto stepped towards the Raikage and bowed his head. I apologize for my tardiness. I meant no disrespect. I apologize to all of you, most of all to you, Hokage-sama. You should not have had to come and fetch me. Power without responsibility is what leads to trouble, Naruto. I am not a fool to think that even all 5 of us together would be able to stop you should you decide to disobey our orders, but the ramifications of a ninja as strong as you living outside the rules is disastrous, as we have seen. The Raikage's eyes softened slightly as he saw Naruto's shoulders drop. He could tell the ninja in front of him truly understood what he meant. That being said, we all owe you a great debt, Naruto. You have shown tremendous loyalty and strength in the face of adversity. You have my gratitude. The Raikage stood up and bowed towards Naruto. Followed by the Mizukage, you will always be welcome in the land of mist, Uzumaki-san. The Tsuchikage tipped his hat and bent over slightly. Our scholars will put your name on every history book from here to the Hidden Leaf. You truly are one of a kind. Gaara smiled at the scene. Naruto, you already know you are welcome at the sand whenever you wish, but perhaps come prepared for a fight. I've heard my sister wants to reclaim her title as the strongest wind user in the 5 nations very badly. Gaara followed suit with the Raikage and bowed before Naruto. Tsunade looked at the scene in front of her with tears in her eyes. She could not be prouder of the blonde ninja standing in front of her. Arigato, Naruto, she said as she bowed towards him. Naruto looked around him, shaken to his core. The heads of the 5 strongest shinobi forces in the world were all bowing towards him. He felt more confident facing Kugaya than he felt right now. Tsunade laughed as she saw Naruto physically shaking in front of her and thought she would jump to his rescue. He still had a lot to learn before becoming Hokage, that was for sure. Don't let your ego get too big there, kiddo, otherwise I'll have to ask Hinata to come back in here and give you another beating. That's why he was late to our meeting, by the way. Raikage, our legendary hero, was getting his handed to him by the princess of the Hyuga clan. The entire tent roared with laughter as one after another the Kage's eyes lit up and started imagining the strongest ninja of the generation being beaten up by a little girl. The story hit very close to home for Gaara, who had many memories of Temari's temper whenever he or Kankuro would give her a hard time. The Mizukage looked on in mirth at the scene before her. The fact Naruto would allow the girl to hit him without retaliating spoke a lot about his character. She wished not for the first time that Naruto was only a little bit older. Well, she had time, she could wait for him to grow up a bit, she thought with a smile. Naruto was glad that the conversation had moved on. He was better at dealing with people laughing at him than bowing before him. He made a mental note in his mind to get back at old lady Tsunade for that though. He put his hand on the back of his head and let out a loud laugh at the whole situation. His presence was infections and soon the entire tent was laughing again. Okay Naruto, I think we have waited long enough. Please tell us what happened after we were trapped in the Tsukiome, Tsunade asked smiling. If you don't mind Tsunade, I would like Sasuke and Kakashi to be here to tell the story with me. There are some parts that only they will be able to share, Naruto said happily. The entire tent went quiet. This entire scene from here to the end I might actually just remove. I wanted to try and show how much Naruto would do to save Sasuke's life, but I think this is too far and makes Naruto seem like a total loser. You expect us to allow that Rouge Nin murderer into our presence, Naruto? You ask too much, said the Raikage loudly. Naruto knew he was standing on thin ice, but he didn't care. Sasuke needed him, and he would not abandon him after all this. I understand your concern, Raikage, but Sasuke is the only reason I was able to win today. Without him, we would all be dead. Sasuke was dealt a bad hand. I dare any one of you who was in his shoes to say you would not have gone after the man who murdered your entire clan, your brothers, sisters, parents. The Raikage looked angered. It is not about his motives, Naruto. His actions cannot go unpunished. He attempted to murder everyone you see in this room. I understand he is your friend, but nobody is above the law. Naruto sighed. He didn't want it to come to this, but he had no choice. Raikage, as you stated earlier. None of you would be able to stand up to me in a fight. I can guarantee all of you now. The only one who would be able to beat Sasuke is me. And that is one order I will not follow. I will not hurt my brother. He is not the ninja you met during the 5-Cage summit. He has changed. And I can guarantee Sasuke will never harm an innocent person again. I can also guarantee you that he will not sit by and allow anyone here to kill him. I stand before you here today asking, no begging, for you to pardon him. At this point Naruto fell forwards on all fours and put his head against the ground, bowing as low as he could towards the Raikage. I will not have it. We cannot allow a murderer to go free. The law is absolute, shouted the Raikage as his fist sparked with lightning and he punched it through the table in front of him, sending wood chips flying everywhere. Naruto didn't flinch from his position on the ground, kneeling in front of the Raikage. Then take my life as payment for his. Sasuke didn't attack you at the summit. It was me. I disguised myself as him so he would come out of hiding and I could find him. That's my confession. The room went deathly quiet as the Raikage stepped towards Naruto. His hands started crackling with lightning. And you are prepared to accept the punishment for attacking a cage? I am, replied Naruto, still not moving from his position on the floor. Naruto, no, shouted Tsunade as she started running towards the Raikage. Bakken, no, yelled Naruto. We have finally achieved peace. Do not shatter it for something as unimportant as me. I know the law, and I have accepted my choice. Tsunade stopped. His words cut her apart. Raikage, please. The room was silent as the Raikage lifted his hand above his head. The lighting blade he formed was hot enough to make the entire room sweat. Naruto could sense what was about to happen. He did nothing to try and stop it. The Raikage swung his blade down towards Naruto's neck. Gaara had jumped out of his seat and sent his sand flying to try and protect Naruto's neck. He didn't actually expect the Raikage to go through with it, but even as he sent his sand flying he knew it wouldn't make it in time. Gaara's heart sank in his chest. Tsunade screamed. The Raikage's hand came down. Naruto looked at the ground. He heard Tsunade's scream, felt Gaara's chakra rising, and then, nothing. Naruto looked around him. It was pitch black. Two massive red eyes opened in front of him. You absolute moron. It's not just your life you're happily throwing away here, it's mine too. And if you think for 1 second, I'm going to let this lighting thief wannabe touch you, you're sadly mistaken. Naruto looked up and walked towards the large red eyes in front of him. Massive teeth appeared before him snarling, but Naruto took no notice and walked straight up to the gargantuan fox and laid his head on its snout. I love you too, Kurama. The mental space around him lit up, and he looked around at all the tailed beasts surrounding him and Kurama. I missed you guys, he said brightly. Naruto, while I am impressed with your sacrifice, you know as well as the rest of us that we cannot allow the Raikage to hurt you. As much as you want to protect Sasuke, we feel the same way about you, the massive two-tailed cat said while gently licking its paws. Naruto put his hand above his head and laughed. Man, you're so cool, Matabi, all of you are. I'm glad I got to know you guys, I just wish we had more time. Naruto stopped them all before they could protest. We can't attack the Raikage now. If we did, everything we fought for during the war would be thrown away. People would consider you guys as monsters again, and the trail of revenge would start anew. I won't allow that to happen. You guys know as well as I that I can suppress your chakra if I have to, but I'd rather leave you guys as equals. I couldn't care if you want to sacrifice your life, Naruto, but I already told you I won't let him kill me, and because we're stuck together that means he can't kill you either, so tough luck, kid. Naruto turned back towards Kurama smiling. Nice try, buddy, but you know as well as I do that your other half is still trapped within that Shinra Tensei outside. When I die, your chakra will flow back into your other half, making you whole again. I don't care. I won't allow it, snarled the Nine Tails. Naruto laughed. I want you all to promise me one thing. Stop letting anger and hatred fuel your lives. You are just as important as every other living being on this planet. I'll miss you. With that, Naruto rotated his palm on his stomach, as the 9 gates fell downward, blocking out the chakra of the tailed beasts and stopping Kurama from using his chakra to help Naruto. Please, Kit, don't do this. The fox had a tear coming down its face. Thank you, Kurama, for everything. Naruto opened his eyes waiting for the impact, but nothing came. The Raikage stopped his hand a millimeter from Naruto's neck. A great sigh of relief was let out by everyone in the tent. I'm sorry, Naruto, but I had to be certain. If there was even a 1% chance that you could turn against us, it would have been too risky to let you live. Not only did you do nothing to stop me, even though you easily could have, but you even suppressed the power of the Kyuubi from helping you. You were absolutely willing to die for the law. You have convinced me, Naruto Uzumaki. I hereby absolve you of your crimes, and leave the fate of Uchiha Sasuke up to you. You will be held directly responsible for any actions he causes. Sasuke will be removed from the wanted list within our territory, and if the other Kage agree, I am sure they will do the same. Quote, thank you, Raikage, Naruto said with a sigh, shaking slightly. Very well. I think it would be best to postpone this story to tomorrow morning, so we have time to get Sasuke here in front of us. Are we agreed? Asked the Raikage. All the Kage raised their hands. As the Kage walked out of the room, leaving only Naruto and Tsunade inside, Gaara walked directly towards the Raikage outside, killer intent spilling from every limb in his body. Raikage, Naruto may forgive you, but you can rest assured the Sand Village will never forget what you have done today. All of the 5 great nations will know what you chose to do to the hero who saved us all. The time of revenge is over, Raikage. We will follow Naruto's words, create bonds out of love and trust, not out of fear. The Raikage stopped and smiled. You are right, Kage. I wanted to test his resolve and he has passed. I could not allow myself to believe that perhaps lasting peace was achievable. But seeing how Naruto was willing to sacrifice his life to stop the chain of revenge, well, perhaps it is achievable in our lifetimes. However, it will not be done by me. I plan to step down and pass the role of Kage onto a leader who does believe in Naruto as much as he believes in himself, and for that I am willing to shoulder the hatred of the 5 great nations, because just perhaps I too want to believe in peace. Gaara was stopped in his tracks. He was not ready for that answer. He simply nodded and looked up towards the sky. The stars had come out. They had been in that tent for too long. The second the last person left the room, Tsunade collapsed on the floor in tears. She had nothing left. She was almost forced to sit there and watch her family be slaughtered in front of her eyes. She had only felt this broken once before, when her love had passed away protecting the village. Naruto walked out of the tent smiling. It had taken him the better part of half an hour to finally explain himself to Granny Tsunade and calm her down after the incident. He had never seen her so broken before. He was expecting to turn around and see her ready to punch and lecture him on what a moron he was, but instead she was kneeling with her hands covering her face. His heart had broken when he saw that, and he went running up to her and embraced her with his good arm. She hadn't said a word, she had just sobbed into his shoulder until there were no tears left, and asked him why. Thinking back on his response, he hadn't expected Tsunade to understand straight away. The hate has to end, Granny. I gave someone my word that I would bring peace to this world, and the first step is breaking the chain of hatred, even if it had to end with me. I've truly learned what it means to be a leaf shinobi in the past few days, and even if I'm gone, I know the will of fire burns brightly in those I leave behind. She hadn't said anything after that, but he felt she had forgiven him because she looked into his eyes and smiled. The sun had already gone down by the time Naruto had left the tent, and the bracing cold was causing him to shiver a little bit. He looked up towards the sky and could sense where the tailed beats were waiting within the Shinra Tensei balls Sasuke had created. He would have to release them tomorrow after the battlefield had cleared of shinobi. He wasn't sure what to do with himself at the moment. He had always done what was required. Now he felt a little bit lost. The battle had been won. What now? Naruto. Come on, we've been waiting for you, shouted Ino as she came running towards him. Naruto looked up and saw the blonde bombshell running up towards him, albeit slightly off balance with every step. I've been waiting for you to come out ever since we heard that the cage had dismissed the meeting, but you never came, Ino said, slightly pouting at the end of her sentence as she got closer to Naruto. Sorry, Ino, I was talking to Hokage-sama about some stuff, only managed to get away now, Naruto stated. He was looking into Ino's eyes. Something seemed off about them. She couldn't quite focus on him, as if she couldn't decide which of his eyes to look at. Oh Naruto, you kept me waiting here for 20 minutes so you could spend time with some old lady instead, Ino said with a slight hiccup and a giggle. She leaned in close and gently whispered in his ear, guess you're gonna have to find some way to make it up to me, hi. Naruto was taken aback slightly. What was she talking about? Granny Tsunade was the Hokage. Everyone had to spend time with her. It's part of her job. Naruto was about to answer when Ino suddenly pulled back and put her face directly in front of Naruto's. He could see every detail of her face, her long eyelashes still covered in dust from the battle earlier. Everything happened in slow motion for Naruto after that. Ino closed her eyes and moved forward gently. She wasn't quite sure what was going to happen, but the sake pushed her onward. Giving her bravery she didn't think she had. Her lips touched his. Oh God. His lips are so rugged, I could get lost in them. She pushed forward, kissing him harder. Feeling her tongue gently touch the inside of her own lips. Deciding if she should risk it and push them through it, thought Ino, I've come this far, and she drove her tongue between her lips and slowly made contact with the skin on the other side. Then nothing. Those perfect lips that had been hers a second ago were gone. She opened her eyes and couldn't see anything. Then she heard a gasp and looked down. There was her savior flat on his, looking up at her like he had no idea what had just happened. Ino smiled to herself. Yay, she still had it. Naruto couldn't believe it. This was his first kiss and it was happening so suddenly. 1 minute Ino had been looking at him, the next her lips were on top of his. He had panicked. He had no idea how to react. His heart felt like it had shot through his chest, and oh God, her lips felt amazing. And then something pushed their way through them. He had collapsed on the spot when he felt Ino try and French kiss him. It was all just too much for him. He fell hard on his and looked up at the perfect 10 standing before him smiling. He couldn't move. Wow, that was worth saving the world for, Naruto stated matter-of-factly without even thinking about the meaning. A slight blush crept up Ino's face once she heard those words. Had the idiot really just said what she thought he said? Ino's blush started increasing exponentially the more she thought about what she had just heard, until she couldn't take it anymore and started walking away back towards the tent. Come on, idiot, everyone's waiting. Naruto jumped back to his feet and rushed towards Ino's side. You tell anyone what just happened and you will wish you'd never been born, stated Ino sweetly in Naruto's ear as they walked back towards the tent shoulder to shoulder. Tsunade frowned at the scene she had just witnessed. She had never expected Ino to fall for her adopted son's idiotic behavior, but she supposed right now any girl in the 5 nations would happily give up their own parents for the chance at just meeting with her blonde-haired ninja after what had happened today. She had a slight chuckle when Naruto had fallen down just from the slight touch of Ino's lips on his. She would have to watch out for Naruto with this one. She had seen men fall hopelessly for girls like Ino before and they always came off second best. Her smile quickly turned into a frown as she sensed a familiar chakra near her. Uchiha, why are you here? Tsunade's anger exploded within her. All the emotions from the past few days went off like TNT inside her heart and she had to do everything she could to hold it in and stop herself from trying to kill the Rouge Nin standing next to her. I don't understand. He could have outpowered the Raikage without even trying, said the Uchiha slowly, thinking over each word before he stated it. He could easily have forced the Raikage to his will and everyone else in that room would have followed him without question. Tsunade's knuckles cracked and blood started running from her hands where her nails were digging into her skin. That is why you will never be half the shinobi he is. If you cannot understand why Naruto lay down with his nose in the dirt in that room, then I cannot help you. Sasuke spat back. You call yourself his mentor and yet you were willing to let him be cut down in that tent. You turned your back on him as well. The ground shook as Tsunade slammed her fist into the floor. I wanted nothing more than to rip the Raikage's head of his shoulders with what he just did. Then why didn't you? Shouted Sasuke back. Tsunade went quiet for a while. Because Naruto asked me to trust him. Because he has the one thing you're missing, connections, between everyone he meets. If I had done anything in that room, everything he had fought for his entire life would have been eradicated. Thousands of shinobi would have wanted to avenge a murder, instead he wanted it to be seen as a legal trail and execution. Ending the trail of revenge with him. I would have slaughtered the Raikage where he stood if he had killed Naruto. I would not be able to sit back and do nothing. Screw the trail of revenge, Sasuke said looking directly in Tsunade's eyes. My grandfather always told me the Uchiha were not driven by hate, but by love, that they loved more and stronger than any other clan, Tsunade replied without breaking eye contact. He told me the same thing, replied Sasuke breaking eye contact and looking at the night sky. I didn't believe him at first. How could my clan that had their history written in blood and death have more love than anyone else? It took Naruto standing up to me and almost killing me for me to finally understand. All this time I thought I was driven by revenge, but I wasn't. I was driven by love. Love for my lost family. Love for my brother who I had thought was lost that same night my family was and had been replaced by a monster, but I was wrong. Even Itachi was driven by a love for his village. Love so strong that he was willing to bear the burden of an entire genocide for it. I have found that same love for my village Hokage, but I think perhaps, the intensity of love that the Uchiha feel may not be the best decision-making tool. We are rash and think with our hearts before our heads. I will protect Konoha from the shadows, and I will protect the future Hokage no matter what, because I believe in my brother, I believe he can end this shinobi hell we grew up in. Tsunade followed Sasuke's gaze and watched the new moon rising. All her anger had evaporated during his speech. I do not trust you Sasuke Uchiha, but I hear the will of fire in your words. Tsunade turned her back on Sasuke. Naruto has put his absolute faith in you, and because of that you are now a free man. Do not forget what he has done for you Sasuke. You have a legacy all your own, the last Uchiha, don't let it stay that way. Tsunade held back a tear as she walked away from the raven black-haired youth behind her. It had been a long day and it was time to find an old friend. Naruto's chest felt like a lion was roaring inside it. he was busy trying to memorize that moment forever, to the best of his ability, ignoring the part where he fell over and made a fool of himself, but that kiss. Man, he could relive that moment forever, he thought. Naruto. Naruto. Earth to Naruto, shouted Kiba as he waved his hand in front of Naruto's face. Naruto jumped back into the real world and realized they had walked back into the tent. "Oh hi Kiba," said Naruto, putting his hand above his head and laughing. "Punishment shots for making us wait," screamed Lee from somewhere off to the side. "Seconded," shouted Kiba. "Third ED," said a tipsy Temari. "It's decided. Naruto has to down the bottle," shouted Lee again from the back of the tent. Bang! Everyone's face went pale as Sakura punched Lee out of his handstand position and back onto the floor. "There isn't going to be any left for the rest of us, Lee." The tent filled with laughter as random calls of Sakura's and alcoholic and other ruder phrases could be heard passed around the tent. Before Naruto knew what was happening, a shot of sake was pushed in front of him as Temari stood up to make a speech. She coughed lightly to get everyone's attention. "Hi, when did the sand rookie get?" Before Kiba could finish his sentence, a gust of wind had thrown him clear out of the tent and straight past a worried-looking Shikamaru who had opened the tent flap at the perfect time to let Kiba straight through. "I see celebrations are well underway," said Shikamaru nonchalantly after watching Kiba roll out of sight behind him for a few seconds. He was pulled into the tent and had a shot of sake pushed in front of him in the exact same way Naruto had a few seconds earlier. Now, if there are no more interruptions, at this point Temari was quietly looking around the tent, but everyone was deathly silent. "I came here looking for someone to throw myself against and punch out my frustration at today. But as everyone knows, Naruto wasn't here when I arrived." A bunch of laughter escaped everyone's lips as they remembered back on Temari walking into the tent fan drawn and challenging Naruto to a battle right there and then to reclaim her title as strongest wind user. Instead, she had received 2 punishment shots, one for interrupting the festivities and one for arriving to the party late, which she adamantly argued she didn't deserve as she hadn't been invited to it in the first place. This had caused her to gather an additional punishment shot for attempting to weasel her way out of the first one. "I instead found friends welcoming me with open arms, and open sake," "Hear hear," shouted the crowd. "So here's to you guys," shouted Temari, lifting her glass into the air. "And to Neji." "Cheers," shouted everyone as they tipped their heads back and downed their shots. Naruto smiled as he downed his shot. He felt the liquid burn its way down his throat and found a sense of energy he didn't know he had as it hit his stomach. He had seen Ino down her shot out of the corner of his eye. He didn't think it was possible to down a shot of sake that seductively. The night went on in good humor, with stories being shared and laughs heard throughout the camp. As it began to get later, people started to excuse themselves and head off to bed. First was Hinata and Tenten, who had to help carry each other off as they were fairly tipsy and both were exhausted. Tenten gave Naruto a hug goodnight and headed out of the tent. As Hinata approached Naruto, she barely looked at him, instead giving him a quick hug and leaving quickly behind Tenten. Sakura and Ino were sitting next to each other and watched in anticipation as Hinata had hugged Naruto goodbye, wondering if another slap was going to be thrown. "I don't understand that girl," said Sakura. "She's clearly smitten with Naruto, but it's either too shy to talk to him or so angry she wants to beat him senseless." "Who cares?" laughed Ino. "If she doesn't want to take her chance, someone else will." Sakura looked at Ino, understanding dawning as she noticed Ino start to blush and look in another direction. "You didn't," squeaked Sakura as she took hold of Ino's arm, looking at her. "When you went to go look for him after the meeting." "Ino, you didn't. We had an agreement." Ino looked back into Sakura's eyes, showing only pride. "Hinata doesn't deserve him. You saw the way she hit him, even when he did nothing to stop her." Sakura sighed, feeling slight jealousy, but that was quickly washed away as she looked at the young blonde laughing with Shikamaru and Temari across the tent. She did feel love for him, but not romantic love. She had known him for too long, and they had gotten too close over the years. He was her family, she knew that, but nothing more. She looked back up at Ino. You know Naruto has less emotional range than Sai, right? Said Sakura looking at her best friend. Ino laughed at that. I do know. I felt quite a bit of emotional range earlier tonight, said Ino as she waved her eyebrows seductively. Sakura just shook her head laughing as she poured herself and her friend another shot. To life, she said. To life, replied Ino with a smile. The party had died down until it was just Naruto, Shikamaru and Temari left. Everyone else had left to go to bed including Sakura and Ino. Ino had left telling Naruto she couldn't wait to see him again and to keep in touch, to which Naruto had stuttered slightly and just nodded. All of the remaining 3 ninjas were inside sitting on the chairs just relaxing in the quiet night air. So, how did you do it? Asked Shikamaru to the room. Easy. You just open your throat and pour. We've been having downing tournaments at the sand since before you guys were born, stated Temari with a laugh. Shikamaru snorted and rolled his eyes. I was talking to Naruto. How did you defeat that thing? I've ran the simulations through my head 100 times, and I can't find a solution. He was just too powerful. Naruto was quiet for a while and sighed. Tell you what, I have to let the cage know tomorrow about everything and I only really want to tell the story once, so how about you come then and listen? You have a deal, said Shikamaru. Just then the fabric of the tent opened, and a figure stepped through. Both Shikamaru and Temari jumped into defensive positions. They were still on edge from what had happened today. Naruto didn't even flinch from his position. Hi Sasuke, about time you came in. You've been sulking outside for hours now. Shikamaru looked at Sasuke with disgust. I'm sorry, but I have to go. Thank you for tonight, Naruto. Shikamaru walked out brushing past Sasuke on the way. What has his pants in a knot? Said Temari sitting back down on her chair and relaxing. Nobody said anything. Come grab a seat Sasuke. I would offer you some sake but I think Temari managed to finish it all, said Naruto laughing, earning a death stare from Temari. Sasuke smiled. I can't remember the last time I've had a drink with friends. Well, you do look like quite the nerd to be fair, so I'm not surprised, said Temari laughing to herself at her own joke. Sasuke looked at her curiously. You do know Naruto was actually the biggest nerd you've ever seen back at the academy. Well, at least he grew out of it, said Temari defensively as she stood up and walked towards Naruto. She leaned down and gently kissed him on the cheek. You owe me wine chakra lessons, oh great savior, she said in a mocking voice, lifting her eyes to look at him seductively. Don't think I won't collect. Temari stood up feeling a slight head rush as the alcohol was catching up to her. She walked out past Sasuke, to the door. Be a little more confident, Uchiha. Not everyone wants to kill you. With that, Temari whisked herself out of the doorway and left the 2 brothers alone. Sasuke looked at Naruto with a raised eyebrow. Naruto tried triumphantly to act cool, but his cheeks were starting to grow redder than his lava Rasengan. Both brothers looked at each other for a second before bursting out laughing. 2 girls in one night. Being the hero does seem to have its perks, sighed Sasuke as he fell into the chair next to Naruto. He reached into his jacket and removed a hip flask. He unscrewed the lid, had a sip and passed it to Naruto. What is it? Asked Naruto as he had a sip. Whiskey made in a small village not far from the leaf, said Sasuke. Naruto coughed slightly as the liquid went down. Good shit, he said as they both bust out laughing again. Naruto handed the flask back as Sasuke accepted it and took another sip. A comfortable silence settled over the 2 of them. So, what was that kiss with Ino like? Seemed to me she swept you off your feet, said Sasuke laughing. Naruto turned his head and looked at Sasuke. He flashed back to lying on the cold ground after their fight and hearing Sasuke make his first joke. Everything was going to be okay. Naruto sighed. I'll tell you one thing, she's a far better kisser than you are. Both ninja cringed and laughed at the memory. What have you been up to today? You disappeared with Kakashi-sensei early this morning, asked Naruto. Sasuke took another swig from his flask before responding. Me and Kakashi went back to base camp. He told me I'd have to lay low until he had the chance to talk with the cage and sort everything out, so I've been doing just that, staying out of sight, doing a lot of thinking, wondering if and how things will ever go back to the way they were before. They won't, said Naruto, reaching over and picking up the flask from Sasuke's hand before having another sip. You're a rouge nin who saved the world. People don't know how to act or how to respond. Don't try and be the old Sasuke, because you aren't. We've both grown so much. How do I even begin, Naruto? I have nowhere to live, no family, no connections, said Sasuke sadly. You have me, you have Kakashi, and you have Sakura. She never gave up on you. As for somewhere to live, it's been pretty lonely in my apartment for the past years. I wouldn't mind a roommate, said Naruto as if it was no big deal. Sasuke smirked. You don't think you have to ask Ino for permission before letting me stay first? Man, I am gonna wipe that smug smile off. Naruto was stopped halfway through his rant by Sasuke. Naruto, I came here to thank you. I know what you did for me in that meeting with the Kage Idan. Sasuke was cut off in the same fashion that he cut off Naruto earlier. Don't mention it, idiot. You're my family. Of course I wouldn't let them do anything to you, said Naruto loudly with a look of determination in his face. Sasuke leaned back and accepted the whiskey from Naruto and took a swig. Nothing else needed to be said between the two ninja. They both sat back and just relaxed in the quiet. Finally it was over. Naruto blinked his eyes open. He swore he could have heard. You heard correctly. In case you had forgotten, me and the rest of these annoyingly happy wankers are still stuck in these stupid rock balls. Kurama, please, if you could just be a little more quiet when you're yelling. You're lucky I don't turn the volume up to Super Saiyan after that stunt you pulled yesterday. I'm sorry, Kurama, but you share my memories. You know why I had to do it. Now my head is killing me, so if you could. It's a good thing we don't share an IQ as well, cause you're an idiot. I've had the rest of the tailed beasts harassing me about what happened last night all morning, and like hell am I dealing with these compliance alone, so you best get your in here right now before I find a way to shout louder. Sasuke woke up still sitting on the same chair as last night. He guessed Naruto and himself must have fallen asleep on them. He could hear Naruto talking and opened his eyes to see Naruto having an in-depth conversation with himself. You know no one is here, Naruto. Please don't tell me you're going crazy. Naruto looked over at him. It's Kurama. He's being a real this morning. I just have to go and chat to him quick, hold on. Naruto opened his eyes and saw all the tailed beasts looking at him, most filled with worry, but Kurama was looking at him furiously. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to lock you guys out last night, but I couldn't let all we have fought for be thrown away. And you think killing yourself was the answer? Naruto stopped. He looked at Kurama as the fox was snarling at him viciously. You're right. And don't get me started on Sasuke. Sorry, what? You're right, it wouldn't have solved anything. I was stupid and rash and I'm an idiot. Kurama was thrown off slightly by this. He had been expecting a shouting match of epic proportions and had been preparing his argument for the past 2 hours. He didn't expect this thick-headed idiot to admit he was wrong so soon. Well, I mean, yes, I know I was right. Your opinion matters to me more than you know, Kurama. I won't take it for granted again. Naruto looked up at the massive fox smiling and put one hand above his head and started laughing. Besides, who else will look after me when I make another stupid mistake? The Kyuubi smiled at Naruto and said loud enough for all the other tailed beasts to hear, well, perhaps that blonde bombshell you locked lips with last night could help you. All the tailed beasts chuckled at Naruto's expense, watching the verbal banter going on between Kurama and the young ninja. Naruto turned bright red. Kurama, you backstabbing good-for-nothing weasel fox. The entire chamber filled with the laughter of the tailed beasts as Naruto started hurling obscenities at Kurama for disclosing his love life to everyone who was there. Naruto, as much as we are enjoying this, my paws are starting to cramp from being kept in this ball of dirt for so long, said Matabi. Naruto smiled. I have an idea, give me 30 minutes and we will be right there. Comma. Naruto came back to the real world and saw Sasuke looking at him. You ready to release everyone, Sasuke? Sasuke nodded towards him slowly. Anytime they're ready. Meet me outside in 30 minutes. There's just a few people I want to ask to come with, smiled Naruto as he stood up and stretched out his limbs before running out the tent. 30 minutes later, a group of people had gathered on the hill just outside the campsite. Included in this were the 4 Kage and Darui, who had been made the interim Raikage as a had resigned last night, as well as Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, Ino, Kakashi and Shikamaru. Naruto stepped in front of the crowd to address them all. I made you a promise yesterday to tell you exactly what happened, and I thought who better to help tell the story than the guys who were an integral part of it. Sasuke lead the way. With a nod, the last Uchiha set off at a sprint and started heading in the direction of the tailed beasts. After Naruto smiled and started running after him, the rest of the group warily followed. The 5 Kage ran alongside each other. Do you know what the meaning of this is, Hokage? Stated the old man floating alongside her curiously. No idea. Naruto just sent word that he requests us to meet him here so he can tell the story, said Tsunade back towards him with a shrug. She wasn't concerned, she trusted Naruto with her life. Further back in the crowd, Ino was running with Sakura. I don't know why I'm coming with. He only invited me because I was with you when he came barging in to call you, said Ino as she ran next to her friend. What happens if someone asks why I'm here? She stated worriedly, looking at the 5 Kage ahead of her. Sakura smiled. Well, then I suppose you just let them know that Naruto felt uncomfortable leaving his girlfriend so far behind, so he made you come with. Ino faltered and almost tripped at hearing that. It's not funny, Fivehead. I'm serious, these are the leaders of the ninja world in front of us. Sakura turned to Ino with a smirk, and standing in front of them is your boyfriend. Ino rolled her eyes. She wasn't getting anywhere with this argument. Besides, Naruto wasn't her boyfriend. She had kissed him once when they were both drunk. It didn't mean anything, did it? She thought back to what he had said. She was worth saving the world for. Ino felt a shiver run down her spine as she kept thinking about those words. Ino Uzumaki had a nice ring to it after all. Kakashi stayed at the very back of the group with Shikamaru running next to him. He smiled at the fact that Shikamaru had managed to get himself invited to this. He truly would be a great strategist one day. Sensei, do you trust Sasuke? The question came out of Shikamaru's mouth so fast Kakashi wasn't even sure he had said it. You're right to be cautious. Naruto is a great ninja, but he trusts people without falter. It is his weakest quality. I'm sure you already know this, but he's going to need a lot of support when he becomes Hokage. I'm glad you're here for this, said Kakashi quietly enough so only Shikamaru could hear him. As for your question, I fear we have no choice but to trust him. Naruto is the only person who will be able to stop Sasuke should he decide to attack the leaf again, and at the moment Naruto is so caught up in having his family back together he can't see the risks. All we can do right now is make sure Naruto isn't taken for a fool and support him. Shikamaru nodded at his mentor's words. Although he was correct in almost everything he had said, Shikamaru disagreed with him in one aspect. With enough planning anyone can be defeated, even Sasuke. He would not leave his village's fate up to chance. A contingency plan will have to be developed. The large crowd arrived at the scar that was left in the land from Naruto and Sasuke's battle. The tailed beasts were floating above them, still contained in their balls of earth. Is this where one of the 10-tailed beast bombs hit? The land has been annihilated, asked Gaara looking around. Kakashi spoke up quickly, so he could cover for the two standing up front before anybody let something slip. I think the first Hokage and Madara battled here earlier in the fight. Hiroshima's 1000 Buddha devastated the ground. The 5 Kage looked around in awe. I didn't realize the first Hokage was capable of such destruction. He truly deserved his title, stated the Mizukage. But that still doesn't explain what we're doing here, Naruto. Naruto looked at the waiting people and smiled. Above us the tailed beasts were carried by Sasuke to protect them after the battle, because they were too tired to defend themselves. Today I want to introduce them to you and let them tell you their side of the story. Naruto, are you crazy? They're mindless beasts. They will kill us the second they're free, shouted the old man. Yo, ancient old man, you fool, that's not them at all. It's true. Give them a chance. And see for yourself. The gathered crowd laughed at B trying his best to find something to rhyme with tailed beast. Give them a chance, please, said Naruto looking at the crowd. A nod of agreement could be seen through the awaiting people. Sasuke, let them go, shouted Naruto proudly lifting his leg on a boulder and striking a pose. A small cough came from behind him. Naruto looked behind and saw Sasuke scratching his head. Naruto, if you don't mind, I'm missing the other half of a release seal here, said Sasuke while holding up his one hand. Naruto reluctantly stepped back from his heroic pose and moved towards Sasuke laughing. Okay, on 3, 2, 1, release, both ninja lifted their hands and made the symbol for release together. The ground shook as each of the balls of earth came crashing down, and one by one the tailed beasts lifted themselves out. Everyone except for Sasuke and Naruto took a step back as the massive animals lifted themselves into the air and looked at the waiting crowd. About goddamn time, stated Kurama looking down at Naruto. I should eat all of you for making me wait so long to set us free. Kurama lifted his lips and snarled at the waiting shinobi in front of him. The entire crowd had a serious look on their faces as worry crossed their eyes. Kurama, enough, hurled Matabi towards him. You heard what the old man said, we're at a turning point. Or do you want them to fear us and trap us for the next 1,000 years again? Kurama gave Matabi a very dirty look and faced the other way, staring at the hills behind them and ignoring Naruto and the cage behind him for the time being. Oh, ignore him, he's just a big softy, laughed Naruto as the rest of the tailed beasts joined him in making fun of Kurama. It looked for a second as if Kurama was going to respond but thought better of it and snarled menacingly at Son Goku instead, who had gotten close and was starting to try pet his head as if to add to the fluffy pet idea. Naruto saw the interaction and decided it was best to start the story before Son and Kurama decided to have a monster brawl in front of the 5 cage. And so he did, starting from the rise of Akatsuki, to the story of Obito and his motives. Here Kakashi spoke about who he was and what had caused the anger to fill in his heart. They moved on to the death of Itachi and how Sasuke had avenged the hidden leaf. Sasuke spoke about Kabuto and the impure world reincarnation jutsu that the enemy had used to bring back their fallen soldiers. He spoke about how he had forced Kabuto to lift the jutsu. Naruto stepped in again and spoke about his time with Kurama, learning to control his chakra on the Cloud Island and his fight with Obito with Kakashi and Guy. They spoke about Madara arriving and the reincarnation of the 10 tails. Sasuke spoke about how Orochimaru had helped him reanimate the fallen Hokage. Kakashi spoke about his fight with Tobi and how he had realized their visual powers were linked, how they managed to defeat Tobi, and then how Madara had managed to become the 10 tails Jinchuriki. How Guy had opened the 8th gate and brought down a can of whip on Madara, all the while the tailed beasts adding their parts to the ever-growing story. Then they all become quiet. Naruto stepped forward and told them how Madara had performed his infinite Tsukuyomi, and how Sasuke had saved himself, Sakura and Kakashi from it under his Susanoo, how they had to watch while the rest of the world was captured in a genjutsu. His breath was caught in his throat when he thought about how Kagaya had emerged. Sakura spoke out when it was clear Naruto was struggling to speak while reimagining what had happened. She told the gathered crowd about how the Princess of Chakra had emerged and taken them to other dimensions. How they were separated from each other and Tobi managed to save them. At this point she had started sobbing into Ino's shoulder as she held her, the memories bringing back too many emotions for her to continue. Kakashi cleared his throat and finished the story, told the crowd how they had managed to seal Kagaya and that the sage summoned them back to the real world. Here he took a break, and something flashed in Sasuke's eyes. Was it shame? But Kakashi never spoke about anything after. That was it, the story of how they had saved the world. The awaiting crowd was quiet, Everybody was still digesting everything that had been told to them. Before anybody could speak again, Naruto stood up and looked at all the 5 cage. The time of keeping the 9 great souls behind me locked up has ended. We could not have won this war without their help, and perhaps if they were free to begin with, we would never have had to fight this war in the first place. The 4 cage seemed shocked at Naruto's accusations, all except for Gaara, who was looking at Shikaku with a smile on his face. Surely you cannot expect us to let these monsters walk around freely, shouted the Tsuchikage. Naruto looked at him with fierce intensity. The people behind me are no more monsters than you or I, they are my friends, and I will not allow them to be taken prisoner again. I will not be a part of this insanity. Surely you can see the chaos allowing these creatures to walk freely would cause. The Tsuchikage looked at the other 4 cage around him, but none of them would meet his eye in agreement. Our ways have not worked, Tsuchikage. Perhaps it is time to consider something new, said Tsunade softly. You've all gone mad. Mark my words, the Earth Shinobi will not be a part of this madness. With that, the old man turned his back on the Great Alliance and flew into the air. A collective sigh left the group of gathered shinobi. Naruto, Kurama had been listening to the entire conversation and had truly understood what the old sage had meant when he had told them to put their faith in Naruto, his friends. All of the tailed beasts touched hands and brought them forwards towards Naruto. He smiled and gave them a fist bump. We will not forget everything you have done for us, Naruto said, all the tailed beasts in unison. A warm glow filled Naruto as he looked up and watched as one by one the great chakras started lifting up and walking away. Great vibrations could be felt through the earth as they walked, until all had left except for one. It's been too long since I've been whole again, said both halves of Kurama in unison as the Kurama outside turned into a flow of bright golden chakra and was absorbed by Naruto. Ino was watching from the back of the crowd in awe. She could barely keep standing in the presence of these monsters, and yet Naruto was sitting in front of them smiling and laughing, making fun of them as if they were the closest of friends. She was amazed as she saw him stand up the cage and tell them he would not allow them to hurt his friends. She watched without believing as every single one of them fist bumped him and thanked him for everything. She almost passed out as Naruto began to glow a bright gold and the 9-tailed fox was absorbed by him. Ino looked at Sakura and saw pride on her face as she smiled at Naruto. What have these 3 become? Though Ino as she looked at Team Kakashi. Shikamaru had managed to calm down his thought about the massive monsters in front of him quick enough to allow him to listen to the entire story. He couldn't afford to miss even the smallest detail. He leaned down on one leg and crouched with his hands touching in front of him, trying to commit every word, every expression to memory. A few things in the story didn't add up. He noticed Sasuke's expression at the end when Kakashi stepped in and ended the story abruptly. There was something they were not telling us. A thought jumped into Shikamaru's mind. He quickly pulled his hands together and formed the sign for release. Nothing happened. He pulled out his kunai and was about to stab himself in the arm when he was caught by Kakashi. Sometimes the most intelligent among us suffer the most. I know there's nothing I can say to convince you, but not now. Wait and pay attention, said Kakashi soft enough so only Shikamaru could hear as he released him. Shikamaru nodded and put the kunai away. He's right. Stupid of me to allow myself to be so caught up in the possibility that this could still be a genjutsu that I could miss important information. Shikamaru immediately found his focus again and zoned back in on what was happening. He noticed the Tsuchikage shouting at Naruto in the other cage. He quickly picked up on what parts of the conversation he had missed and focused on the situation. Naruto was rash, something they would need to work on before he become Hokage. After the argument had ended and the Tsuchikage had flown away, Shikamaru was already thinking about counters to any moves the Earth Village would make. He knew they wouldn't allow themselves to be undefended, but they were not stupid enough to cause an outright attack on Naruto. Moves and countermoves, though Shikamaru all the while watching Naruto absorb the last of the tailed beast's chakra into himself. He didn't totally disagree with the opinion of the Tsuchikage. He would need to find a way to counter against any attacks. Naruto would not always be there to protect them, and more so. If something happened and Naruto decided to protect his friends at the expense of the village, thinking his actions were right, he would need to be stopped, and they would have to find a way to do that. A saying that his father had told him many times came to his mind. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. A small tear left his eye as he realized he would never hear those words from his father again. With that, he closed the straps of where he kept his kunai. He knew this wasn't a dream. Kakashi had noticed Shikimura's face change the second Sasuke hesitated. He saw him attempt to perform the release seal and knew what was coming. He reached forward and caught his arm just before he stabbed himself and made a scene. If doubt was spread among the ranks now, it would cause chaos. Not for the first time Kakashi realized just how bright this ninja was. His father may have been the best strategist in the 5 nations, but this kid was on a whole other level. The ranks of ninja were moving out and heading back home. The Earth Village had been the first to pack up and leave that morning when their leader had flown in and ordered them to head out as soon as possible. The rest of the villages had awaited the return of their respective cage before heading off. Many heartfelt goodbyes were had, as new friends bonded by conflict swore to see each other again soon. Away from the commotion of the campsite on top of a nearby hill stood Naruto and Gaara, watching the ninja below them pack up and heading home. That was an amazing thing you did for the tailed beasts earlier, Naruto, but you know standing up to the Tsuchikage will have consequences, said Gaara calmly. I'll be ready for whatever comes, replied Naruto with a smile on his face. Gaara nodded in affirmation. I hope to see you again soon, Naruto, hopefully next time over drinks and good food instead of conflict. Naruto put his hand above his head and laughed. You can count on it, Gaara. Gaara started walking down the hill towards the rest of his brothers. Oh. And one more thing, Naruto. I'm leaving something very important to me with you for a while. If anything happens to it, I will hold you personally responsible, said Gaara, his tone going cold near the end. Naruto gulped. What is it? Gaara turned and looked at Naruto with a smirk across his face. Oh, you will find out soon enough. With that, the sand cage walked forward and was lifted by a swirl of brown sand and carried forward and out of sight. I wonder what he was talking about, thought Naruto to himself, scratching his head. A piece of paper drifted slowly downwards, being carried by the wind as it slowly made its way towards the blonde-haired ninja, carried as if by a life of its own, effortlessly dodging everything in its path. Swept up in a breeze, it came to hover just in front of the ninja's eyes, with a single sentence written on it. This time, let us hope this will become the flowers of hope that never dies. Thank you, Naruto. Naruto had heard these words once before. He activated Sage Mode almost instantly and grabbed the paper in front of him. He felt the small trickle of chakra from the paper and located the source within moments. Without telling a soul, he disappeared from the mountaintop and raced towards Konan. Konan sent the paper towards the battlefield. It would find its intended target without too much effort. She needed answers, and she didn't have anyone else to turn to. The last thing she remembered was looking into the eyes of the man she believed was Madara as the light slowly faded from her. Then she had awoken. By the time she had figured out how much time had passed and what was happening, the war was already over. The rumors about the hero Naruto were spreading like wildfire across the country. She had to know what had happened. She followed the signs of destruction until she had come upon the campsite of the Allied forces. She was unsure of herself. She was still a member of the Akatsuki in their eyes. She needed to find a way to talk to Naruto so he could explain what had happened, perhaps even explain why she had come back after Madara had. She put a hand to her throat and looked up, trying not to think about it. She was sitting in a small meadow a few kilometers away from the main body of the forces. She had sent her note a while ago and was sure Naruto would arrive any second. She could hear the trickle of water a small lake was trickling into a river nearby. Tears started forming from her eyes as she remembered the pain of losing her family. She could feel Madara's hand closing around her neck again as she started sobbing and struggling for breath. She felt a warm hand across her shoulder and the soft flow of warmth moving into her body. The chokehold around her neck was forced off and the depression pushing her down was suddenly lifted. She opened her eyes and saw her body glowing with a soft warm golden hue. She looked up into a pair of bright blue eyes staring down at her in worry. Without thinking, she grabbed onto Naruto's shirt and pulled her face into it, trying to hide her tears. He felt warm. She couldn't help but remember the same feeling every time Yahiko had pulled her close and told her everything was going to be okay. Conan, don't worry, it's going to be okay, Naruto said softly, looking down at the broken ninja before him. Conan gasped and pulled back, looking up into Naruto's eyes. She had to rub her face and look again, because right then she could have sworn he had sounded exactly like Yahiko. She wiped the tears from her face and tapped the spot next to her, indicating Naruto should sit down. What's happened, Naruto? Naruto looked at her confused. I thought you would have known that. You were part of Akatsuki at one stage, surely you knew their master plan. Conan felt hurt by Naruto's accusations. That was never my dream, nor do I think was it Nagato's. We were lost war orphans, Naruto. You have to understand the idea of a world without war, a world filled of peace. It appealed to us. We didn't care how we had to accomplish it, the ends justified the means. Don't give me that crap, shouted Naruto's. What's the point in that world? You abandoned your friends along the way. I know, squeaked Conan softly, tears forming on the edge of her eyes again. You changed us, Naruto. After meeting you, I put my faith in your dream. I, Conan started letting the tears flow from her face again as she remembered the battle with Madara. What happened after you left, Conan? Whispered Naruto softly, looking into her eyes. I took a stand. I tried everything to stop Madara, but it wasn't enough. At this point Conan put her hand against her throat and started sobbing again. Naruto leaned towards her and embraced her in a hug, not saying a single word, just letting her sobs rack her body and being there as her wall. He wasn't sure how long this continued for, but he didn't care. He was here for her. Eventually Conan pulled herself from Naruto and looked up towards the sky. I don't know what to do now, Naruto. I have no friends, no family, no village. Naruto smiled at her. You know, I've heard the Land of Fire are on the lookout for skilled origami artists. I believe they add some amazing decorations to the flower shops around town. Conan looked in Naruto and let out a soft chuckle at his joke without even meaning to. Please tell me what happened. Well, where do I start? Asked Naruto. From when I left you with pain, tell me everything. So Naruto did. He sat down next to Conan and talked. He hadn't felt this at ease in a long time, and it was nice to be able to chat to someone independent. Naruto didn't even realize how much time had passed as he finished his story. He looked up and saw the sun was setting. At some point Conan had rested her head on Naruto's shoulder as he was talking. When he looked down now he could see her eyes were closed and her breathing was slow and deep. He laughed to himself. Man, I never knew I was that boring. Without a second thought Naruto lifted the sleeping Conan gently using chakra arms and made his way back towards the campsite. He wasn't sure who would still be there, as most of the ninja would have left to go back home long ago. He carefully walked back, trying his best not to wake her. He wanted to know what had happened in her battle with Madara. Who he knew was actually Toby, but he would wait for her to tell him. As he walked out of the trees into the clearing, he saw all the pop-up medical tents had been taken down and the ground was empty except for 4 remaining ninjas sitting around a fire chatting. He slowly walked towards them until he could clearly make out Ino, Kakashi, Temari and Hinata all laughing around the campfire cooking something. As he started getting closer, the ninja looked up and noticed him and started waving for him to come over. Slight frowns appeared over their faces as they saw he was carrying someone. Lucky for Naruto, Conan had the good sense to remove her Akatsuki robes in exchange for something a bit more civilian. Who's that, Naruto? Asked Kakashi as Naruto walked into the light of the campfire and slowly put Conan down on the floor gently, where she proceeded to roll over and start gently snoring. Naruto smiled at Conan's snores. She's just a girl who helped me in my travels with Jiraiya a long time ago. I found her on the outskirts of the battle. All her family were killed in the conflict, so I invited her to stay with us. And does this girl have a name? Asked Ino, slightly irritated. Naruto didn't pick up on her tone of voice and just replied slowly to the group, "Yay, yay. Her name's Konan." Hearing her name, Konan slowly opened her eyes. She wasn't sure what had happened. One minute she was listening to Naruto's story, the next she was leaning on his warm, gentle shoulders, and now all of a sudden she was surrounded by 4 people and a smiling Naruto. Where am I? You fell asleep, so I brought you back to the camp. Almost everyone's left, but apparently a few of my friends still think I need protection, said Naruto lightheartedly. Inside he was very happy they were waiting for him. Konan slowly sat up and saw the people around her. There was a silver-haired young ninja right in front of her, smiling. He held out his hand, and as she grabbed it he pulled her up and introduced himself. "I'm Kakashi. Nice to meet you. Behind me is Ino, Temari and Hinata." Konan smiled and introduced herself to the remaining ninja. A loud growl emanated from her stomach as she smelt the delicious food cooking on the fire. Everyone laughed and dished themselves up some food as they sat around the campfire just enjoying each other's presence. "So why are you still here, Temari?" said Naruto, smiling. Temari looked at Naruto curiously. "I'm coming with you guys for a bit. Didn't my brother tell you?" Naruto's face sparked with understanding. "Oh, that's what he meant." Naruto started laughing. What did he say?" asked Temari. "He told me if anything happened to you he would hold me directly responsible," said Naruto, still laughing. "Man, that weasel, best hope he has found a good hiding place by the time I get home, passing me off like I'm his property," Temari said while she aggressively pulled her fan closer to her as the rest of the campfire let out soft chuckles. Konan's eyes were slowly drifting closed as she was losing the fight to stay awake after the warm meal filled her up. Kakashi and Temari said their goodnights and went and crawled into some sleeping bags next to the fire and had passed out quickly. Before Temari went to bed, she walked up to Naruto and softly whispered something in his ear that made him turn a bright shade of red. Both Hinata and Ino saw what had happened and were dying to know what she had told him. Naruto sat around the fire with Ino and Hinata, just slowly looking at the flames. "Thank you for waiting for me. It's nice being able to be around friends and not have had to travel back alone," said Naruto. "Of course. We would never have left you, Naruto," said Ino, brightly smiling at him. Hinata nodded fiercely as well. She hadn't spoken much since Naruto had arrived. She was ashamed of her actions earlier when she hit him. She hadn't thought about his feeling and had selfishly used him as a punching bag to make herself feel better about Neji's death. She had told her father what had happened in the tent, expecting him to support her, but instead he just looked more disappointed than she had ever seen him before. As he turned and walked away from her, he said only one thing: "Perhaps the fault is not with his reaction, but with yours." She was determined to make things right and apologize to Naruto, so she had stayed with the others and waited for him to return. At first they had been worried about where he was, but Sasuke assured them that he was fine and would return when he was ready. "Naruto, how do you know this Konan? How did you meet her?" asked Ino. Only Hinata noticed there was something slightly more than just curiosity in her voice. Was that jealousy? She took another look at her supposed friend and noticed her cleavage was showing just a bit more than normal, as if she had found the tightest fitting top she owned and put it on. A spear of hatred formed behind her eyes and she slowly realized the real reason Ino had offered to stay with them tonight. Then her heart dropped as she thought of what she had done to Naruto the previous night again. Naruto sighed and thought quickly before answering the question. There was no point in lying to his friends, they would find out the truth eventually anyway. "What I'm about to tell you, you guys have to swear to mention it to anyone without my permission." Both girls looked at him curiously but promised. Naruto looked directly at Ino. She was a member of the Akatsuki. Hinata gasped loudly and put her hands in front of her mouth to keep herself quiet. The Akatsuki wasn't always the terror organization you know. They were originally formed to bring about peace to the world. But they were taken over by selfish individuals and Conan got lost within them. She was there that day I defeated pain. She gave up on the Akatsuki and put her faith in us that, since then she has lost all her friends and family and she needs somewhere to belong. Ino nodded slowly taking in the story, and if the village knew she had once been a part of that organization they would never accept her. Exactly, said Naruto as he reached up and yawned. Anyway, I think I'm going to bed guys, long way home tomorrow, said Naruto. I'll take first watch, chirped up Hinata almost a little bit too loudly. Everyone nodded and slowly made their way to their sleeping bags. Hinata gently grabbed Naruto's hand before he could walk away. Can I talk to you quickly? Whispered Hinata softly. Naruto nodded and made his way with her just out of earshot of a certain blonde bombshell who was considering using her mind transfer jutsu to make Naruto tell Hinata to get lost. I am sorry, spat out Hinata, literally hitting Naruto in the face with a few specks of saliva that came out with the intensity of her words. Naruto laughed as Hinata quickly grabbed her shirt and used it to try and wipe off her spit from Naruto's face, all the while turning bright red and whispering how sorry she was repeatedly. He grabbed her hand and stopped her from trying to wipe his face as he stared into her eyes. Man, she really does have such amazing eyes, thought Naruto. Hinata, it's okay. You don't need to apologize, I deserved it. No, that's not what I. Before Hinata could finish, Naruto interrupted her. I owe you my life, Hinata. If it wasn't for your bravery, pain would have taken me during my fight with him. I can never repay you for that. Naruto pulled her into a one-armed hug. I miss Neji as well, more than anything, and I promise I will never upset you again. With that, Naruto let go and walked towards his bedroll and climbed in. No, that's not what I meant, Naruto-kun. I was the one who was wrong. I should have been apologizing, but Hinata had said it so softly that she was the only one who heard. A pair of eyes watched the campfire burning from the shadows. The figure hadn't expected things to go so smoothly. Conan was supposed to be arrested and thrown in for questioning as a member of the Akatsuki. But no matter, it was all a waiting game after all. Yes, my spelling and grammar is terrible. I struggled to finish this chapter, so it's not my best. We'll look at it again when the story develops more. The first light of the morning sun dripped over the bodies of the motionless ninja, slowly itching their eyelids, gracefully warming up their exposed face. The group gently rose and Kakashi handed out some dried bread for breakfast. Even with the meager meal, everyone's spirits were high. They were going home. Ino was the first to speak. Wonder what we will find when we get back. Apparently it's pretty beat up. Those roots seem to have taken root everywhere and damaged half the world by the sounds of things. As long as Ikaku's ramen shop is fine, everything else can be rebuilt, laughed Naruto with a bright smile on his face. Ino looked into the eyes of this strange ninja. Yesterday he had been laughing with nine-tailed beasts as if they were his best friends, and now he was more worried about his favorite ramen shop than his home. She didn't understand him at all, and that made her want him so much more so. Who are you, Uzumaki? Whispered Ino softly. Huh, I didn't hear you, Ino, sorry, said Naruto, leaning in closer to her face with a strange look in his eyes. Ino's face went bright red as she blushed and took a step back very quickly and turned to walk in the direction of Temari. Nothing, just talking to myself. Heaven knows I could use an intelligent conversation every now and again. Heavy. Not even a day after I saved the world and I'm already getting shredded again, laughed Naruto loudly as he put his hand behind his head. The group laughed and started making their way back towards the Leaf Village, Naruto next to Conan, with Hinata and Kakashi in front and Temari and Ino behind in pairs of two, chatting all the way. Temari nudged Ino a few minutes into their trip and waved her eyebrows as she pointed to Naruto. So, what's going on between you and Blondie? Ino almost lost her footing and had to catch herself as she kept running next to Temari. Nothing, we were just talking. Oh, I saw. Too bad your face seemed to be wanting to do a lot more than just talking, smirked Temari as she looked towards Ino. Ino gave Temari a very dirty stare and picked up her pace, catching up to Naruto and Conan in front of them. Well, if you're not keen, mind if I take a shot? Shouted Temari at the top of her lungs so Naruto and Conan could hear as well. Both ninja turned to look over their shoulders, but all they saw was Temari killing herself laughing and Ino rushing towards them with a look of hate and what seemed to be embarrassment on her face. Both Naruto and Conan looked at each other puzzled. Don't look at me, they are your friends, said Conan shrugging. Naruto had a twinkle appear in his eye at this. You're also my friend now, and that makes them your friends as well. Conan laughed. Well, the blonde-haired one I like, the sand ninja though scares me. Before she could finish her sentence, Ino pushed in between the two runners and joined them. Hi guys. Mind if I join you up here? At this point Ino wrinkled her nose. I think Temari keeps farting back there. Must be why she's so good at wind style, cause she's always full of hot air.